Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Data Science Hangout and our last Data Science Hangout of 2023. I know people always say this, but I seriously can't believe that we're already here at the end of the year. I want to say a huge thank you to the 47 leaders who have joined us at the Data Science Hangout this year.
And thank you, Rachel, for hosting.
Thank you. And those 3 sessions where we all were the featured leaders. And who knows if this is accurate with Zoom, but the over 2,600 people who have joined us at Data Science Hangouts since we've started them, and the core group here who keeps coming back and hanging out with us each week. So thank you all so much for making this space what it is. I really love getting to spend time with you all. If this is your first time joining us today, it's so nice to meet you. I'm Rachel. I lead customer marketing at Posit. If it is your first hangout, say hi to us in the chat because we'd love to welcome you in as well. This is our open space to chat about data science leadership, questions you're facing, and getting to hear about what's going on in the world of data across different industries. So we're here together every Thursday at the same time, same place. We'll be on a bit of a holiday break here for the next few weeks, but we'll be back on January 11th. So if you're watching this recording on YouTube later and want to add it to your calendar, it will be in the details below on how you can join us live. We're all dedicated to making this a welcoming environment for everybody. So we love hearing from everyone, no matter your years of experience, titles, languages you work in, or industries. And it's totally okay to just listen in here if you're out walking your dog, if you're in a coffee shop or something. But there's always 3 ways you can jump in and ask questions or provide your own perspective on certain topics. So you can raise your hand on Zoom and I'll keep my eye out. You could put questions in the Zoom chat and just put a little star next to it if it's something you want me to read out loud instead. And then we also have a Slido link where you can ask questions anonymously, and we'll share that in the chat here in just a second. And I love Mike's suggestion in the chat here to get everybody going, because we love the conversation that happens in the chat. But share your favorite holiday film in there. I'm taking Mike's suggestion from their Pfizer hangout too. But with that, I'm so excited to be joined by my co-host today, Sean Nguyen, Senior Staff Data Scientist at S2G Ventures. And Sean, I'd love to have you jump in here and introduce yourself and share a little bit about your role, but also something you like to do outside of work too.
Yeah, so I'm Sean. I'm first data science hire at S2G Ventures. We're a venture capital-based company based in Chicago. We're investing in food and oceans and clean energy companies. And so we were founded in 2017. And I was kind of brought on in 2021 as the first data science hire to kind of flesh out the capabilities of the organization. And my background is in molecular biology. And so I was really interested in working in data. And then I kind of learned about this thing called data science. And then I got really addicted to learning how to program. And then I kind of took those skills and took it to S2G. And then in terms of things that I like to do outside of work, I really like photography and cooking. So I'm a bit of a person that likes to try out new restaurants in Chicago and cook at home. So, yeah.
What's one of your favorite things to cook?
I like to cook different cuisines like I don't know, it depends like what I'm feeling. So sometimes I'll create like Thai curry paste from scratch, right? And just kind of make that and use it for different things. So I like trying different cuisines, you know. So, yeah.
Well, I get to start off with some of the questions here as we wait for them to come in from everybody.
Mhm.
But I just want to say I loved your Posit Conf talk from this year,
Oh, yeah.
and was just listening to it a few days ago. But I love when you spoke a bit about the POC or proof of concept that you did. And I
Yeah.
thought it might be helpful to start by talking a little bit about that so we can all get some context into some of the work that you do. Would you be able to explain a bit about the project that you came up with to use for your POC and kind of get buy-in across the company for your
Yeah.
project?
Yeah. So as the first data science hire within the org, I knew, we wanted to get information to our business units, right? And so what I wanted to do was run analyses and send it to, let's say, my manager, right? The thing is that when I created our Markdown document at the time, in order to share it with her, I had to basically render the HTML file and send it over, right? Because I didn't have like a server, right? Because it's proprietary information. We can't share it easily, right? Because you don't want it out in the world. So I'd send the email attachment and send it to her, and then she would be like, "Oh, this is great, but like I don't want to download something and have to open it, right? So I'd want to be able to click a URL link." And so in terms of like what it was it's kind of an analysis of anything that she wanted to know that's like perfect for her job, right? So let's say like here's the meetings that you have during the week, right? And then it's really insightful information that you can't necessarily get from, let's say, a um like a dashboard or something like that. It's super specific to them, right? So like in terms of the idea of the POCs, that is to kind of almost give that nugget of like, oh wow, this is really useful to me, and then being able to surface that to them, right? And then what that does is it gets that buy-in, because oftentimes when you're trying to, let's say, get a new service or a new product, right? Some people will look at the sticker price, right? It's like a sticker shock. It's like, oh wow, there's no way I'm going to pay that. We already have Tableau, we already have Power BI, whatever. Like, why do I want to get another, data science product I've never heard of? So in order to kind of almost get the buy-in, is you kind of give them that like, oh wow, show the art of the possible, right? To be like, oh, this, you know, here's this cool thing I was able to do, and then they're like, oh my gosh, I really like that. Tell me more. And then that's how you can kind of get them to be like, oh, this is really useful because you kind of are servicing information that's really relevant to them at that time, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think that's something that's come up quite a bit on the Hangouts too, which might be good to chat a little bit more about, is the communication piece of your insights, but also realizing you might need to have some different approaches. Like not everybody's going to go and look at a dashboard. They might need a summary of insights in an email. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, what lessons have you learned about that communication piece?
Yeah, so I think the idea of being able to proactively find information that might be relevant to people, because like to your point, like I can create 10 dashboards and then just be like, oh, check the dashboards. Other people, they don't have time to do that, right? And so sometimes you can be like, oh, it looks like you're meeting with, Mary from whatever company. Did you know that XYZ thing happened, right? And then they can go armed, ready with this knowledge whenever they meet with this individual, and they don't have to check a dashboard, right? And so being able to find whatever information, whether it be from a different data source, some analysis or report, and then you're able to kind of send them an email, right? Or some type of alert dynamically, right? So I use the Blastula package within R to kind of send emails programmatically to people, right? And so that's how I was able to get them to really like latch onto that. Because to your point, you know, it's people don't want to necessarily have to check something, right? It'd be nice if it was delivered to you in your inbox, and you can be like, oh wow, this is really helpful, and then you go on your way. Yeah.
I just shared into the chat the example that you referenced in
Oh,
your talk, but Kelly O'Brien at Posit built this
yeah.
example where she had like a cookie cutter Etsy shop, and she showed how she used Blastula and Posit Connect to send out these conditional emails. It's just a fun example I wanted to share in the chat
Oh
there
yeah,
too.
it's great.
And I'm seeing a lot of love for Blastula here in the
Yeah.
chat as well. So feel free to share some. Oh, I think you already are. Share some resources on that too. Thanks, Marcos. George, I see you asked a question here in the chat. Do you want to jump in? I know it's a question kind of for the chat as well, but I thought it would be good to discuss live too.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, that got me thinking about just prior roles that I had, and I was wondering if anyone else had a prior job in sales. And I think the way you put it, Sean, where you said, the person might ask, I already have this, I already have that. Why do I need this new thing? I'm like, that's exactly like the kind of sales question and like interaction that I used to have in a prior role. Um, but I never really thought about bringing those skills here because I was never really good at it. It's not like my natural state to try and sell things. So just wondering if like there's any best practices that maybe people have in general from being in a like sales role. Maybe you sold cell phones, maybe you sold cars. I don't know. But it seems like it's very important in what we do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have experience in sales, but I think to your point, I think it's about trying to find that the way that you can provide value. I feel like I'm reiterating my talk. Sorry. So, it's to find value that the person would be interested in, right? And so then you're trying to make their life a little bit easier, right? Whether it be you're selling something or you're trying to give them information, in my case, information that allows them to act and, kind of do their job a little bit better without friction, right? And so at least for me, it was just building different different reports, right? That allows them to do whatever they need. One thing I did recently, just I think on Tuesday. So I decided last year to make a Quarto Reveal.js document, so a slide deck of like we call it S2G wrapped. It's like the Spotify wrapped, where I summarize all the things that we've done in the organization, and it's like more than just a PowerPoint deck because it actually embeds all the different widgets and dashboards, and so I use like GT with the interactivity with it. I used all these different charts from like High Charter and all that, and allows people to kind of interact with stuff and kind of see everything as a summary, right? And it's one of those things that I got so much good feedback. They're like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing," right? And then allows the folks to kind of see like all the work that we've done. And so that's like one thing that I kind of created, and I would encourage other people to do that is to use like Quarto, right? You can create an HTML file, a PDF, or you use like the Reveal.js presentation, or you can render it as a PowerPoint as well. But it allows you to go from just routine analysis to something that's really amazing that you can share with people in your community.
I love that idea, George, about like using that prior experience that people may have learned in sales. And it was just making me think, I mean, I was in sales at Posit before, but like one of my first jobs was actually working a beer cart on the golf course and like driving around in the golf cart. And that in a way was also a sales job, but like figuring out different ways that you could like go out of your way to create a better customer experience. Like if somebody mentioned they like needed sunscreen, like going to grab that and like bringing it out to them. And so it was just kind of like making me think about like when you're serving these insights as well and like figuring out the best way to share that information so your end user has the best experience possible. I always love being able to tie in like past roles like that and lessons learned. But RM, I saw you had a comment on that thread too. So I was curious if you wanted to add anything on that.
Hi, thanks. No, not a whole lot to add, but just wanted to say that sales skills come up in surprising ways. You might have the most wonderful piece of analysis, but if you can't convey that to your stakeholders, that's essentially worthless. So it's important to remember, no matter how cool your code is or how powerful your analysis is, you still have to sell the thing. I know that sales sometimes is downplayed a little bit, but it's an important skill to have.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, for sure. I've noticed that firsthand, right? Where yeah, you can have the fanciest models or anything like that, but unless you can surface it to them and something that's meaningful to them, it's exactly that point, right? Where you can have, if it lives, I think it was David Robinson, right? If it lives on your laptop, it's essentially useless, right? You need to ship it or send out something so that people can actually see it or appreciate it, right? Because like, yeah, it's great on your computer on the code, but like, will people actually be able to use it, right? It's cool that you know about it, but you want to share it with everyone else, right? So yeah.
Absolutely. Alan, I see you had a question. You want to jump in here?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Sean, I'm really curious about how you figured out, as the first data role in the org, how did you and your leaders and your peers figure out what like success would look like for you? Because on one hand, you've got like you've got some autonomy, you can do POCs. At some point, you need to figure out like, does that get formalized into, like, am I successful at my job? And I'm wondering what that process was like for you. How did you get agreement on like, okay, I think this is what I do now, and people are happy with that. What was that process like? How did you figure that out organizationally?
So I think my role has evolved over time at S2G, right? And at first, it's just that we had all this information, right? We wanted to be able to, because like at the end of the day, technically, for the bottom line for S2G is like being able to invest in innovative companies and then hopefully being able to generate market returns for the fund, right? At the end of the day. And so for us, it was clear as like, hey, are we driving value for our portfolio companies? Because if they're successful, then in the end we'll be successful. And so it was clear for us is being able to identify, let's say, investors that we would want to co-invest with or other companies, right? So it was clear from there, like if I'm able to identify investors or companies that are relevant to us, then therefore it will help the bottom line of the organization. So in terms of like how I'm successful, so if I'm able to identify or create different models that allows us to, you know, find out a company that's a diamond in the rough or an investor or someone that we may not have interacted otherwise, right? We allow them to find them by doing analyses and things like that. And therefore, that's how, like, at least for me, I was successful, right? And so one way to do that is to be able to kind of interview the different stakeholders, not necessarily your manager per se, right? You get guidance from them, but then you interview stakeholders, identify what their pain points, right? It's like, oh, I every time, I'm scrambling right before my meeting to find the talking points to whoever I'm meeting with, right? So then I was like, okay, let's take the different data sources using the contextual knowledge of like the different data sources that we have. So for us, we use Salesforce, other data sources, right? Trying to integrate them and then, provide a proof of concept or whatever. And then you drive value there because then you're able to say like, remember when you went to me and you said, I have trouble figuring out what I'm going to talk to about with this person. I'm able to provide that. Therefore, I give them something that they like. And that's how you can kind of be successful in that regard, at least for me. Right. Yeah.
Was just to follow up a tiny bit, was there anybody who, again, as the first role of the kind, was there anybody who thought you were going to be doing something different and you had to like reconcile, like, oh no, I think it's this, and then figure it out together?
For sure. Yeah. I think, we had different tools. And then I think for me is I knew what I wanted to do, right? But then sometimes you can't do that because you need the data foundation there, right? You have duplicate accounts. You have like there's so much like things that you need to cleanse and to be able to run the cool fancy models, which I would love to do. But the thing is sometimes the data's not there. It's not clean. So it's like getting, I think for me is like you create the POC and then because you know what you need to do in terms of cleaning the data, get the data sources and actually make it so that it's usable so that you can do it relevant analysis, right? So you kind of give them a nugget that they would like, and then on the back end you kind of fix stuff and make it cleaner so that you can actually make more feature rich POCs. But yeah, definitely it's a struggle, right? Getting the buy-in to get the tools to be able to do the thing that they want, and then kind of getting the buy-in from them. But yeah, it's definitely a struggle. So,
Thanks.
but then you have autonomy. I had a lot of autonomy, right? So that's like the pros and cons of like being on a big team versus, being the solo contributor.
Yeah. Nice.
I know you mentioned in one of the answers before, like trying to advocate for tools when you already have something like a BI tool. But I was wondering, do you also work alongside with the BI tools? Or are there any use cases with that?
Yeah, so what I've done recently is we had some BI tools before, but then what we didn't have was because sometimes those tools require essentially more or less model data layers where it's like pretty clear, like when you're querying from this, you feel confident in the data that you're pulling from in terms of the rows and things like that. Um, but what I had to do is I had to create ETL pipelines. So it's just getting data from our raw data sources, transforming them and modeling them so that they're actually usable. And then that actually feeds our BI tools downstream. Right. And so at least for me, we use Posit Connect to have scripts that take the data, do the thing, and then send it back to our data warehouse, right? And then from there, our BI analysts can take the data and do whatever they need to do and feel confident about it. Rather than pulling from the raw logs, right? We're able to kind of just point to, we call it a model data layer, right? And so then you know confidently with high confidence that what you're displaying is accurate, right? So it's not like we're trying to replace one another. We kind of live in harmony, right? So I'm able to take the data, clean it, and then run my own analysis, but then other people, like other not power users that can use it to run analysis on themselves and not have to worry about is this correct or not. So yeah.
Thank you. Frank, I see you had a question a bit earlier. Want to jump in here?
Hey, Sean, thanks for all your insights so far. You started talking about modeling and you mentioned, right, like building a model and finding the gems that wouldn't be seen otherwise. And it got me wondering, a lot of this conversation has been focused on sales or, right, like how you pitch data science and the value and how you get information to the right people at the right place at the right time. The question popped into my head. If you had to ballpark it, right? This is not a super quantitative answer I'm looking for, but I'm curious, if you look back, what would you say you attribute your success to in, right, like 50%? Is it that the sales and the operations and how you delivered data science to your organization versus the modeling and the statistical rigor that you do kind of like behind the scenes?
In terms of like how, like where do I spend my time, or like in terms of what metrics, sorry?
Yeah, no, like what do you attribute your success to? Like
Oh.
it sounds to you like you've been pretty successful in your role. So if you had to look back and reflect and say like, oh, my success, right? Like I do a lot of like delivery and like selling this to the organization versus, the value.
So I would say it was a struggle at the beginning, right? Like there's no doubt about it, of getting all the data, getting the model, and then what I did was I was able to, I would say maybe spent like, I don't know, 75% of the time getting the value in the sense that like getting the nugget of information, but it was in like a Colab notebook, right? So I had this machine learning pipeline, and it was like essentially a white glove service, right? Of like, Sean, give me the top, 100 investors for this company or whatever, right? And so I would do the analysis and run that stuff, but then they were like, oh, you know what? I want someone that's going to write a $10 million check. So then I have to go in and change it. So then what I ended up doing was like, okay, this is not scalable. We need to productionalize this to a POC, like a Streamlit application, right? So it's like a Python app, web app. They can kind of do whatever they want, change the parameters, do it. It's self-service. But I couldn't do that until I had like the foundation of like the model, so to speak. So it's like a ton of time went into that. That was not a good use of uh time in the sense of like tweaking every parameter for them. And so then I was like, okay, let's create a web application. And then that was a beast in and of itself. But then once that's up and running, you're kind of, smooth sailing from there. So it's like 75%. And then the other 25% for me was creating a web application or some type of widget thing that the end unit or the business unit could use to be able to do whatever they want. And I call it productionalizing it because it's like it's no longer in a notebook, but it's an actual app, right? And then another caveat is like the whole deploying. Like when you're in the enterprise, you can't just, I would love to just deploy it in GitHub, right? And make it open to the world. But because it's proprietary information, you have to, that's another like a security thing, getting buy-in from your IT people, right? Because that's a whole beast. If you're in a big organization, you can't just like, you have to go through all these approvals, right? So that's another issue as well. And I can talk about it when I got Connect, right? Because I'm not a Unix, a Linux admin. And so I had to kind of deploy it and learn all that stuff as well, right? And to be able to deploy it within, so I can just send a link to our internal Connect server, and then anyone in the org can access the web application easily. So if you don't have like the enterprise constraints, it's actually not nearly as bad as I'm describing it, right? So there's plenty of ways to deploy stuff freely and within GitHub, but there's a huge amount of time building it, a little bit for creating the proof of concept, like the web application, and then you don't have to deploy it. But then after that, it's smooth sailing because you just update it and push it. And that's why I kind of split it up like that.
It's awesome. It reminds me of when people say, like, if I had X amount of hours, I would spend 90% of that time understanding the problem. Like you're doing that, you're understanding the problem. And then once you get that and you invested all that, like building the thing is relatively easy.
Yeah. Yep, definitely. So it's a lot of it is like understanding the problem for sure. Yeah.
Cool.
You get that with top too. Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you bring people? I had a client who was convinced that these bond metrics were just a few calculations in Excel, and it wasn't. It was a big deal. How do you bring people along who are really uninformed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think it is tricky, right? I think like sometimes you'll see you'll at least for me, you'll run analyses and then it'll be like almost like confirmation of like, oh yeah, I knew that all along, right? But like sometimes, at least for me, we'll have someone, I'll list an investor that, you know, the managing director had knew about, but it wasn't off the top of their head, right? And then for them, they like, oh wow, that is interesting. And then that's relevant to us. But in terms of like different calculations, yeah, I think in your field, is there instances in which a value or some type of piece of information that's surfaced that wouldn't necessarily be like remembered off the top of their head, or do you think it's just more of an understanding of like what's the nuts and bolts of like how you get to that answer?
I think it's like, you know, calculate prices and yields and duration and what happens if you change the sensitivity to yield changes and prices. So it isn't stuff off the top of the head. Maybe now that I've done it, it'll be more on top of my head. But he ended up stiffing me and not paying me at all. So
oh no,
I was really, really pissed. Did an R markdown, had the code for him, everything.
Oh geez, that's a bummer. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, so I want to get better. So it's like the whole thing was convincing him that doing this work was more complicated than he thought. That's what I need the skill. That's where I didn't do well.
Oh no, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, sometimes like I think like in order to find that ability to impress the folks is sometimes you kind of show like what is the normal route or the path in which they get their answers, and then you can kind of show yours. But in your case, I think it's a little bit tricky, right? Or almost like, yeah, like almost like a chart, right? It's like here's how you normally do it. This is how long it takes. Here's how my approach will take. It's more accurate, cheaper, better, faster, whatever, right? And then at least allows them to kind of see that. For me, what I on my end of year things, I'll say like, oh, I helped automate a process, right? That would take our analysts, you know, maybe 30 hours of work, and I run the script and it runs, right? And so then I can say, I'm saving the organization, let's say 120 hours every year that they can do other things, right? And through code automation. So that's how, at least you almost kind of take the numerical approach and quantify, what you're doing to kind of sell yourself, or like what you're doing to provide the customer value, is what I found.
And part of the story was to convince somebody that having reproducible research is a good idea, as
For sure.
opposed to for a few calculations. So that's another thing to sell.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Thank you.
I saw that, Guillermo, you had a question about like kind of like a follow-up to Nancy's question, but also some thoughts to share here. Do you want to jump in? No worries if you prefer to post in the chat, but I just wanted to let you know, Nancy, it looks like a lot of people are weighing in the chat as well.
Okay.
I also wanted to add, just to let everybody know, if I miss anybody's questions in the chat, I don't have my Posit co-hosts here today. So just feel free to raise your hand if there was anything I missed, so that I know. But thank you so much. I see, Darren, you just asked a question. Do you want to jump in?
Oh, I was not expecting that quick response.
Oh, sorry, just saw it first.
Sean, I was curious, you had mentioned in your discussion, your experience working with IT and having to do your own ETL pipelines, being the solo data scientist in your organization. And that can be a lot for just an individual person, especially someone kind of starting out in data science. So I was just kind of wanted to know more about your path and understanding who to talk to and how to get the resources you needed to be effective and do what you want to accomplish.
Yeah. So are you asking more of like how I implemented Posit Connect and Workbench within the org, or just in?
I mean, not necessarily. It's just as a data scientist, there's so many things that individual feel like they have to learn, and on top of that, there's this IT side of things that they may not be familiar with, and just understanding how data pipelines work or how data flows work, and that's a whole other area that some data scientists may not be exposed to.
Yeah, no, so truthfully, I think like I was kind of self-taught, right? And so I didn't know any better, right? So a good example is learning how, like, okay, so I have data that's like duplicate in Salesforce, like how can I make it so I can't dedupe it easily, right? And so then I created some scripts that would dedupe it on a nightly basis. But then to your point, like I need to be able to, let's say I have Connect or some type of process to automate it, right? Making sure you have buy-in from your IT folks. And sometimes with organizations, you are really restricted, right? To be able to even access the database. It's like sometimes you can't even get that, right? And at least for me, I was fortunate enough in that we were kind of building out our cloud infrastructure. And so I had a little bit of a hand in that, but I by no means knew like what was up. I think I talked about in my Connect talk for Posit that I was trying to update the server and I totally warped the image, right? And so luckily I backed it up. And so right now our production image is like the RStudio Connect backup. Like that's what we use in production now, right? Because I didn't know any better, right? And so it's just I think it's kind of having that mentality to be able to move quickly and to kind of iterate and then know that you're going to make mistakes. But then I think it's highly dependent on your IT infrastructure, right? And then being communicative, right? So sometimes like their job is to make sure everything's secure and to not have data leakage or anything like that. And so making sure that you're on the same team, right? To be like, hey, look, we're on the same team. We're trying to provide value to the organization and understand like what are their concerns, right? And then that you're not going rogue, because what I've experienced is that that's not fun for anyone, right? But in terms of for my experience in IT, I think we had some consultants that helped us spin things up, and then making sure that you had weekly or monthly meetings during the implementation phase so that everyone knew what was going on. And then like as you work with different departments, you kind of earn that trust, right? And then trust, I think, at least in the enterprise that I've experienced, helps you get way further than trying to do it all on your own. But I think it is kind of highly dependent, but that's the experience that I've had. That's worked out well. Definitely hiccups though. So
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you. So I've had this come up a bit recently, but I think sometimes people will see like stories about data science and huge companies or teams with tons of data scientists and think like that's so far from something that could be possible for my team if we have one person or three people. Some of my favorite stories are when I get to hear about like superpowers that Connect gives smaller teams, but this does not have to be a Connect focus at all. I'm just curious if you could share with us like some of the use cases where you think people could start making an impact right away if they're a smaller team.
Yeah, so I think for me, being able to host web applications, whether it be Streamlit, Shiny, or other like Flask applications securely, because that's like a big hurdle within, at least for me, is like I can't share it publicly, right? And so one of the quick wins for me is being able to host, whether it be a Cordo document. So, or like I host, oh, look at Apple, like doing all their little thing. This is like look at that. See, I'm sorry. Um, it enables it. So it allows you to be able to host things quickly, right? And so that people can access it in a secure environment. And then you were asking, sorry,
So I
about
guess
Connect.
yeah, no, I guess I was saying like not necessarily Connect specific, but just some
Mhm.
of the like business use cases where people could start helping to make an impact right away. I
Yeah,
think it's helpful sometimes, even if we're all working across different industries, to just get an idea of ways people are impacting the business.
yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, so like a good example is some creating basically like I was helping one of our analysts out by I made a way to like a pivot table essentially, but like where they just upload whatever CSV that they want and it automatically would do it for them. It was like a quick thing that I did for them that made their life so much easier, right? And it would take me time to kind of do it. And I was like, I don't want to repeat myself over and over. So then I basically have, and still it's to this day, it's like this little pivot table thing that'll automatically do whatever they need to do, whether it be cropping photos for people, right? It's just like a little small toy example that does one thing, and it's actually quite helpful, right? Because then it frees up my time, makes them a little bit easier. It's one of those things that I think it doesn't have to be complex because I think even I thought so. I wanted to have the most sophisticated app that has all the little, it's like a Ferrari, right? But you don't need that. You just need something simple, right? Just if it does one thing and it does it well and robustly, people will begin to use it over and over and over, right? And that's kind of it's so funny. It's like I was so proud of this app that I made, but it's like the simple thing, like the pivot table. It's like people like that, right? And it's like whatever. It's cool. It did not take me nearly as long, right? But sometimes it's those little small things that it does it well, and that's what can get people really excited about whatever you're producing.
I love that. How do you find out like what those things are that are taking people way longer than it should, or like the opportunities to help somebody?
Yeah. So I think it's just one of those things where it's like pattern recognition, where someone has come to you like more than three times to do this one thing because you do it well. It's very simple. Whether it be deduping or looking up or aggregating. It's like for us, we want to aggregate our quarterly, metrics or KPIs. And so I do that a couple times. You're like, you know what, maybe we should make this into a little self-service application so that they can kind of do whatever they want. They can kind of tweak things, and then they'll be able to get out the analysis that they need, right? And so it's just kind of that. It's another David Robinson thing. Don't do it more than three times, right? Then create a function. But in this case, if you do something, maybe create a Shiny app or whatever app that can help them do whatever they need to do more efficiently. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Kevin, I see your comment here in the chat about having a repository of these simple apps. Would you mind just sharing a little bit more about like what you'd like to see there? Are you thinking like example companies or?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking that I think that's a great like the pivot table thing. I think there are these things that non power users, and end up having trouble doing. And across lots of industries, it's probably the same. There's probably, a handful of tasks that people across all industries are doing in Excel, that could be done, through with a nifty web app, and yeah, I mean, it might be, yeah, I was just thinking it would be cool if an organization like Posit, who has access to all of us, if somehow, yeah, I'm not sure how we'd prioritize them, because it wouldn't be helpful if you have a library of like 1,000 web apps that do like all sorts of crazy things, but if somehow, it was curated, really, really well, then like, for example, this pivot table app that Sean's talking about, we could probably all use that. And if it's like a Shiny app or something, everyone with a Posit server could just download it from GitHub and spin it up, and try it. So, yeah, that was the idea. But again, it would take some curation, which would be tricky. But it could be valuable if it's done right.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I'm learning from all of you. And when we're talking about building business cases, I need to have these examples where now I can say, look, Kevin from the FDA asked about this. So we gotta go do it. No, but seriously, if there are different apps like this or examples that you all are thinking of, or you're like, oh, I have one, I maybe could contribute, that would help me in building a case for something like this. So I started a thread in the chat if anybody wants to comment in there. Okay, awesome. Let me jump to scrolling up some of the questions. So RM, I see you asked a question about working with IT. Do you want to jump in here and ask that?
Sure, thanks. Just following up a thread that was mentioned earlier. I was wondering if you have any tips or tricks or things that work for you when talking to IT. A common problem that I've seen is IT doesn't really talk data science, and data science doesn't talk IT. Did you have to learn key concepts like what is a server, how do you secure it, like basic stuff like that you may or may not know? Or conversely, do you have to teach IT here? This is what ETL, this is what it does. Here's why data is not clean. I'm curious to know what tips and tricks you might suggest or you think that might have worked for you.
Yeah, I think for me, understanding whatever protocol that they use, right? At least for us, remember, I'm not like a cloud security guy. Learning that we use Okta, right, and making sure that all the things that we had were secured via SSO, right? When we were spinning up Posit Connect within our organization, making sure that we had Okta authenticate everything and making sure that using like the keywords or buzzwords that they identify with. Because to your point, I don't necessarily speak IT natively, right? All the security. And then conversely, they don't speak data science necessarily, right? But to make sure it's like, hey, I understand this is a high concern for you, and I share that as well. And here's what we've done to address that. Does this sound reasonable to you, right? And so like almost meeting them where they are is quite helpful, even though you may not speak exactly the same language, right? So like my understanding with Okta and all that is like, we're using that as the gatekeeper to authenticate everything. And once you use that and you're compliant, then the IT people were relieved, right? Or like, okay, this is good. But then I think your mileage may vary depending on the organization. I don't know how it's like at like the FDA, right? I don't know things like that. In terms of like how it is, right? So it is context dependent. But in terms of the general tips that I found that helped me out was like communicating, meeting them, even if it's like it's secure, like making sure that they understand that you're not trying to go around them, right? To do that, right?
Thank you. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I see a few anonymous questions I want to go over to as well. And one was, it says, thanks a lot. Can you share how you tackled data silos and access company data sources? Did you handle it alone or seek support from other teams?
Yeah, so data silos can exist. I think that's for me, it's like it was not necessarily data silos because all of our stuff is in the cloud. So we use Google Cloud for Google Cloud Platform for our stuff. But for me, it was data was siloed in the brains of like the business unit, and so what we've done is do informational interviews where you kind of you tag along with them, right? To kind of see like how do they go about doing their job, right? And so by going to, let's say, the business development team or the investment team and kind of shadowing them, you understand their either their pain points or like what you can do as a data scientist to kind of help make their job easier, right? And so that's kind of what I had to do to understand that, oh, they're really looking for this information and it is there. It's just maybe not easily accessible to them, right? And so that's how you do that. Because at least for me, all the data is in like BigQuery and all the because we feed everything into the data warehouse and then we do all the transformations and send it back to like a clean layer, right? But in order for me to know what to extract, because there's so much raw data, right? You almost have to understand what is the business trying to achieve, right? Because sometimes I've done things all the time where I do stuff that's what I think is like addresses what they need, but it's not exactly what they would want, right? It's like they may ask for A, B, C, but they really need D, E, F, right? But you don't realize that until you kind of talk to them. Even though they say, I want ABC, they really need DEF. And you don't get that until you actually kind of understand things. Because like we are working with everything, but that's what I've noticed is like you deliver what they ask for, but not necessarily what they need, if that makes sense, right? So it's like you only get that by kind of iterating, understanding where data may be or whatever problem that they're trying to solve in terms of a silo, and then you'll be able to integrate it that way. But I realize that that may not be the case because some enterprises have true data silos where it's like a totally different server. One is on-prem, one is in the cloud, one you don't have access rights to if it's like healthcare data. So I can't speak to that, but I can at least speak to my experience.
How do you figure out more quickly what they actually need if it's not what they told you they want?
Yeah. So because I was in grad school. I'm used to working late night hours and just working on it for just brute force figuring it out. But what I had to realize when I pivoted to industry is being able to iterate quickly, to be able to show them like a janky looking report or with some number. It's like, is this right? Is this not right? Is this like in the ballpark? And then getting the feedback or directionality because I do like that like the shiny, well-polished application. But it's like it'll get to that thing where you work on it, but then it's like they're like, this is not what I wanted, right? And so you're much better off showing something that's really rough, but it's somewhat tangentially relevant to them, and then iterating again, than to like take all the time, make it super beautiful looking, but it's like not the values or the information that they will want, right? So that was kind of one thing I had to kind of unlearn when I was in graduate school to the industry is like um to make sure you're getting feedback from them. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Alan, I think you have a question in the chat. Also a comment. So I'll just have you jump in. I wasn't reading it all yet.
Oh no, I don't want to be my question is more of a comment guy.
No, not at all. I just can't use both parts of my brain.
I think I have two competing things going on in my brain. One of which is I love the idea of the like pivot table use case and all it opens up of making nimble, flexible, ad hoc tools that really meet a business solution. And I love that because it's elegant and it's an exciting way to work. And at the same time, I think it competes with pushback about like proliferation of solutions and a different venue, a different avenue of doing work, which would be like saying, "Hey, the analyst has just got to get better at Power BI or whatever," right? And so I'm really curious about what are the stories to tell that motivate the kind of work that we all really, really super love versus that other story. And so I'm curious if Sean, if you or if others have that success story that motivates that way to work as opposed to the like, well, no, you use the enterprise BI app channel way to work. Because I think those are in somewhat tension. Yeah.
I totally agree. I think at least for us because we're a little bit smaller, right? We don't have that problem yet, but I can definitely envision this being something that is, if you have like a larger team where, yeah, to your point, the analysts or whoever should get more proficient. But at least for my instances, it's our admin that just wants a quick calculation to get on to do whatever they need to do. But I think that's one of those things where, at least for me, if it's in Connect, you can kind of look at the usage metrics and theoretically look at the logs, right, to kind of see like, oh, maybe this person. And I think you have a conversation, right? It's like, okay, it seems like this is really valuable to you, and then you can kind of address like maybe they need to get better. I think you got to be strategic about that. You don't want to be like logging people's activity. But I think another instance is, let's say you have a suite of really small toy shiny apps or whatever for pivot tables and all that. You can almost making that like a featured application that allows them to do whatever they need to do. So let's say they need to pivot, they need to crop, and they need to, I don't know, make sure the data is not missing, right? You can almost package that into a larger application that allows them to do that. But I do see your point about like there is a time and a place to use the enterprise preferred business intelligence tools, right? And that's tricky for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks.
One other anonymous question was, can you share how you developed the intuition as a data scientist or statistician to make certain decisions?
Intuition. Yeah, I think for me, you get like that code sense, or like that you get the inkling for me, what the business would want, right? And then from there, it's kind of testing the water. So what I do is I have folks that aren't necessarily the super senior managers, but I have the junior level people that are working on the business, and I will send them little snippets of like projects, works in progress, right? And then I almost use them as a barometer, like, am I in the right direction? And then if it is, then we kind of go there. So that's like when I did the S2G Wrapped, right? I went to a couple of our associates and I was like, hey, what do you guys think of this? Does this look and feel right? Because sometimes when you're presenting to management, if the values are off, they're gonna like, why is this off? Why is it right? And so you go to the people that are a little bit more junior and you ask them like, hey, does this feel right? Does this seem right? Does it not? And what would you want on like the next slide or whatever, right? And so then you kind of use them to be able to guide yourself on producing different applications or products, data products.
Thank you. Kevin, I realize I missed a question from you earlier about getting feedback from stakeholders. Do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think it's my question really, what I wanted to ask is like, how do you manage the kind of long-term vision, right? When maybe the management doesn't, really know what's possible, and I find myself in this position sometimes where I'm trying to figure out how to, like, where long-term we want to prioritize and build things, but the management doesn't really know what's possible. And so it's hard to get from them, like, what would they prioritize? How do you kind of get priorities from management that's not in touch with what's possible, if that makes sense?
No, for sure. I think, what I've done, right, is I do whatever is asked of me, right? So let's say it's like the XYZ KPIs, you do that, but then sometimes I'll work on a side project. And at least for me, I was doing like a relational graph network this year for our wrap, and I kind of slipped that in as like a little thing. It's like, I think this is pretty cool. They're going to think it's relevant. And you do everything. You're not going rogue per se, but you're just adding that little, oh, look at this cool thing, right? And then you try to find the most, not shiny, but like more like interesting thing, if you can, and insert it. And then that will pique their interest, right? And then they'll ask you for more, and then you almost kind of get that permission to, oh, that was just something I spun up, last afternoon, right? And then they're like, oh yeah, let's do that, right? So it's kind of like the indirect way of doing it. And I'm not advocating for like disobeying your manager or anything like that, but like what I'm saying is, they may not know what's possible, right? And so what we're trying to do is show them like, hey, this might be possible, would you like me to spend more time on this, right? And you still do whatever you need to do, right? That's the beauty of having code is like you're able to use something and recycle it and improve it. But then at the same time, you can kind of work on other things and maybe slip that in and then get them to buy in. And so that's like, truthfully, that's basically the journey that I've been going on is like, I knew what I wanted to do, but like there's certain things that need to be in place in order to do that, right? So if I wanted to do a graph network, I got to make sure the data is correct, right?
Yeah.
Get some way to surface it to them and then do that. And then so then you do those things and then you kind of slip it in once all those prerequisites are met. But I realized
no, and my question is less about giving yourself permission to do that, because I totally get that. Yeah, you got to do it and show them, right? But it's more like just really big picture, like how do you get input on the vision casting for that when, because obviously you can make your own vision of what, you think this graph thing, you have a whole vision for it and you can go forward with that. And that's awesome. But ideally, when you're working for an organization, you do want to somehow get input or some direction from the leadership and not just always be steering them.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you try to have that open conversation with the management and where you're getting like, oh, what do you think about next year us creating like an S2G chatbot, or we're using like a LangChain LLMs type of stuff? And, they may not necessarily understand, be like, oh, a ChatGPT for the organization, right? And so then they're like, oh, yes, we would love that, right? And it's almost kind of like, it depends on your relationship with the management as well.
No, that's really helpful.
But having a conversation would be like, let's just brainstorm what we call like, at least my relationship with the management is like that, where you can kind of like, hey, what do you think about like a ChatGPT for the org, right? Like it's going to be a huge effort. Like, don't get me wrong, but like you're having a conversation. It's like, is this something worth pursuing? Is this not? And then from there, you kind of understand their priorities as well. But I acknowledge it's that may not be the case for some people. I would imagine the FDA, you can't just waltz up to the administrator, right? But trying to understand and meet with the decision makers and kind of ask them about the vision and slip some, would something like this be useful or not, is like what I was thinking. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the brainstorming approach makes sense. Yeah, that's good. Thanks, man.
Love it. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today and for all the hangouts that you've joined us in 2023. Thank you so much, Sean, for sharing your experience with all of us today as well.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Wishing everybody a great holiday, and we'll see you all back in the new year. So we'll be back on January 11th with Maren from TD Bank. And I've been listening to a lot of podcasts lately where they do their credits at the end, and I realize I don't do that here. So I do want to say thank you as well to all the people from Posit who make the data science hangout happen. You may notice I occasionally have a different co-host on helping me. So thank you to Hannah, Tyler, Robert, Curtis, and Catherine, who will jump in to do that, as well as our creative team who helps us make sure we get these recordings up and the upcoming speaker list. So thank you to Olivia, Maya, Green, and Margaret. But have a great holiday season and a happy new year, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Take care.